Hey everyone, it's Darth Nihilus here, back to you today with another video. And today I wanted to talk about the fact that Eminem should have released his Marshall Mathers LP album on exactly February 13 in the year of 2000. Now, before I continue on with this video, keep in mind that I am not at all changing the year he released that album of his, which was in the year 2000, because I think the year he released that album of his was a perfect year, being in the year 2000. I'm also not changing the age that he was at when he released that album of his either. And the age he was when he released that album of his was 27 years old. I don't think that album of his should have came out any year earlier or any age younger, but also I don't think that album of his should have came out any year later or at any age later than 27. But the only thing that I am changing, at least for the most part anyways, or at least one of the main things about that album of his that I am in fact changing or wish would have been different personally in my opinion, is that I strongly believe that album of his should have came out on exactly February 13 in the year 2000, which would have been just 3 months and 10 days earlier than when he actually released the album of his, which was actually on May 23 in the year of 2000. Because, in my opinion, I think it would have been so much better and greater if he would have released that album of his earlier in the year. And when it even comes to his other albums that came out after that one, like his Eminem show album, I also think should have came out in the month of February. His Relapse album, I also think should have came out in the month of February. But I'll do those videos obviously after this one. But the thing I hate is that when he released his Marshall Mathers LP album in the month of May in the year 2000, that made it so that when he released future albums of his, such as the Eminem Show and Relapse, he also released those albums of his in the same month, being May of the year that he released those albums of his, which were May of 2002 and May of 2009. But in my opinion, I just think it would have made a lot more logical sense for him to have released his albums, those three specifically, earlier in the year, like more near the beginning of the year that he released them. Although I don't think his Relapse album should have came out in the year of 2009. I think that was fucking stupid and that it should have came out in the year of 2008. But that will be, a future video for its own topic, because in this video, this is just mainly and mostly about his Marshall Mathers LP album. But I just find it really frustrating, at least in my opinion anyways, that because he released his Marshall Mathers LP album in the month of May in the year 2009, that made it so that, like I said before and earlier in this video, that when it came to his other future rap albums, such as the Eminem Show and Relapse, that he also released those albums of his in the month of May, which I think is fucking retarded and also just weird. Like, why didn't he ever think of releasing rap albums of his in different months? Why did he have to release 3 whole fucking rap albums of his in the month of May? Like, why? I just don't understand that. It doesn't make any sense to me. But, I mean, maybe there's a reason why he did that. But even if that, like, for whatever reason he did that, for whatever reason he did what he did, I just think it's dumb. Plain and simple. And I just hate the fact that he didn't release his Marshall Mathers LP album in February of 2000. Because if he would have, when it would have came time to do, like, those songs from that album of his live, and, like, go on world tour and also do, like, photo shoots and also interviews, for that matter, he would have stayed and remained 27 for a longer period of time after releasing that album of his, if that makes any sense. Like, when he would have performed the songs from the album of his live, and when he would have done interviews, and when he would have done, say, photo shoots for that album of his, he would have been younger for a longer period of time. Because of when he released that album of his, that made it so that when it came time to do like live performances for the songs on that album of his, and like go on tour and do interviews, that started happening more like late in the year of 2000, like almost around the time that he was 28 years old, even though he released the album of his when he was 27. And that is why I say that he should have released the album of his earlier in the year of 2000, so that way he could have been 27 years old for a longer period of time, for like a longer amount of months, if you will, after releasing that album of his. And of course, that would have only happened if he would have released his Slim Shady LP album earlier than when he actually did, which is why I made the video before this one about how Eminem should have released his Slim Shady LP album at the very latest on November 13 in the year 1998. And I strongly believe that his Slim Shady LP at the very latest should have came out on that day, and especially most of all year. And if he would have done that, as I wish he would have in real life, but unfortunately didn't, if he would have done that, hypothetically speaking, he would have then been able to release his Marshall Mathers LP album earlier, like earlier in the year than he actually ended up releasing it. Like instead of releasing it on May 23rd of 2000, he would have released it on February 13 of 2000. And the reason I'm also saying February 13 is because what's interesting about his Slim Shady LP album, when he actually released that album of his, which was unfortunately on February 23 of 1999, which is fucking dumb as shit, it made it so that when it came time for Eminem to release his Marshall Mathers LP album, he released it on May 23. Like, he released both his Slim Shady LP and Marshall Mathers LP album on the 23rd of, different months, of course, but on the same day. So if he would have released his Slim Shady LP album on November 13 of 1998, that would have made it so that when he released his Marshall Mathers LP album, he would have been able to then have released it on February 13 of 2000, which to me at least would have been a dream come true. But that's not even the only main thing that I wish would have been different about that album of his, because even more than that, I wish more than anything that Eminem himself would have released more fucking songs on that album of his, because one thing I said and mentioned many times over, and if anything too many times, on my video about how Eminem should have released his Slim Shady LP album on November 13 in the year 1998 at the very latest, and no later than that, I also stated that because Eminem did not become a famous rapper as young as most other famous old school rappers did who came before him, whether it be, Tupac, Notorious Big, Snoop Dogg, Ice Cube, and so many others, they usually and normally ended up becoming famous rappers when they were literally in their like late fucking teens, early 20s. At the very oldest, early 20s. But when it came to Eminem, he didn't become a famous rapper until he was 26 years old, which is so unfair, especially considering the fact that Eminem had been rapping since he was like literally 16 years old. I mean, he had been rapping like as young as Tupac started rapping out, or like Ice Cube, for example. Eminem started rapping as early as 1988, when he was still in his teens, a fucking teenager, before he was even in his early 20s. And yet it took him until the age of 25 years old to be signed to Dr. Dre's Aftermath record label company on March 9 of 1998. And it took him until the age of 26 to release his first mainstream debut hip-hop rap album, being the Slim Shady LP. And because it took him so long to become famous, and because it took him until his late 20s to release his first mainstream debut hip-hop rap album, I stated the fact that to make up for that, Eminem could have and should have put and released as many songs as he possibly could have on all of his earlier albums, starting with the Slim Shady LP, and even for that matter, starting even from his Infinite album. Because even though he didn't release his Infinite album when he was famous, he released that album of his when he was an underground battle rapper before he was even famous. I still think even that album of his should have had more songs than it actually ended up having, which was only 10 with one skit, and that was it, which is not enough. That wasn't even enough for that album of his. And I love that album of his. I love the cover. I love the songs on it. I love the beats on that album of his. And what I think is unfortunate is Eminem didn't even really use those specific like style of hip-hop rap beats that he himself used really only one time on one of his rap albums and never again, which was, of course and obviously, his Infinite rap album from way back in late 1996 when he was 24 years old. And I don't know what you would really call, certain specific hip-hop rap beats that he himself used that were, of course, produced by the Bass Brothers on his Infinite album. Like when you hear beats on the song, like the song Infinite for the opening track on that album of his, I don't know what you would call that specific style of rap beats. Would you call them like synthwave rap beats or like ambient rap beats? Like, I don't know. But I would have loved it if Eminem would have used similar rap beats to that from his Infinite album later on in his rap career, but sadly and unfortunately, he did not. But anyways, the thing that I just find really heartbreaking is the fact that because Eminem didn't release enough songs on his Infinite album, that made it so that when it came time for him to release his rap albums when he became a famous rapper, such as his Slim Shady LP, Marshall Mathers LP, Eminem Show albums, he didn't put that many songs on them. Of course, he put more songs on those albums of his than compared to his Infinite album, because his Infinite album only had 10 songs at the most. So if you consider the fact that he only had 10 songs on his Infinite album from way back on November 12th of 1996, when Eminem himself was 24 years old, obviously you would obviously agree with the fact that when he released his Slim Shady LP, Marshall Mathers LP, and Eminem Show albums, that he did release a lot more songs on those albums of his than compared to his Infinite album. Like his Slim Shady LP and Marshall Mathers LP albums have a total of 14 songs. That's 4 more songs than his Infinite album did have. And on his Eminem Show album, he had 15 songs, which is 5 more songs than his Infinite album had. But in my personal opinion, I strongly believe Eminem should have had 17 songs on each and every single one of his earlier albums, starting and beginning with his Slim Shady LP album, of course and obviously, and, continuing on with his Marshall Mathers LP and then Eminem Show and so on and so forth. But sadly, he didn't, which I think was a missed opportunity, because like I am saying, and the point I'm trying to make here is the fact that because Eminem himself did not end up becoming a famous rapper that young, like say in his late teens or even at least at the oldest early 20s, like most old school rappers did, and I literally just named a handful of old school rappers who became famous way younger than Eminem ever got to, which is so incredibly unfair. And I don't care what any of you have to say about that, because it doesn't change it from the fact that it is unfair that Eminem didn't become famous that young. I don't care what anyone else believes, because you'd have to be a complete and total idiot and fucking moron to say otherwise, or to believe otherwise. Because, I mean, think about it. Eminem had started rapping since he was a teenager, since his late teens, since the age of 16 in like 1988. But then it took him until the age of 25 years old to finally be discovered by Dr. Dre and be signed to a really popular rap record label company of Aftermath on March 9 of 1998, when Eminem was 25 years old. But that same year, later on, he would have turned 26, and he didn't get to release his first mainstream debut hip-hop rap album until he was 26 years old. But the point I'm trying to make is that because it took him so long to get signed and like get discovered, signed, and then release his first album, I feel like it would have only made logical sense for Eminem to have wanted to make up for that in the way that he could have put and released more songs on his earlier albums, especially considering the fact that those earlier albums of his, or projects in other words, were obviously and of course his best and greatest work that he himself ever released. His first 3 albums were just amazing and incredible and awesome and powerful and intense and cool and badass and goated, just back to back, one after another. All 3 of those, his Slim Shady LP, Marshall Mathers LP, and Eminem Show albums, were just total perfection. But they could have been better. And anyways, I know I'm droning on for too long here, but the last and final thing I wanted to say in this video is the songs in which I really wish more than anything that Eminem himself would have put on his Marshall Mathers LP album, that I also wish he released on exactly February 13 in the year 2000 instead of May 23 of 2000. So, first of all, I wish he would have taken off, or removed in other words, the awful, horrible, terrible, garbage, dumpster fire of a song, Under the Influence featuring D12. I fucking hate the shit out of that song. And the reason why I do is because not only does the beat of that song suck fucking balls, but also the lyrics are ass. They're just total and complete ass. It's as if Eminem himself wasn't even trying. Like, I mean, think about it. He literally starts off the song by going like, translation, 'cause I was high when I wrote this, so suck my dick. 'Cause if you don't like my shit, then you can suck my dick. Like, I'm just thinking, what the fuck, Eminem? I mean, no wonder that song was so shit as it was, because he was apparently really high when he wrote it. And again, the sample of it sucked massive balls. It was complete garbage and dumpster fire. And the lyrics, oh my God. Like, literally, Eminem wasn't even trying. Every time I even try to hear that song, I just cannot even bear it. I always skip it. But that is the only song that I hate, that I just absolutely flat out hate from his Marshall Mathers LP album, and think he should have never made a release on that album of his. And instead, I think he should have kept the cut deleted verses on his song Amityville, which originally were going to have Young Z and Pace One, which are 2 rappers from Eminem's long forgotten about rap group, The Outsiders, which he himself used to be a part of for a short temporary amount of time, like in 1997 or 1998, or both of those years. And he mentioned them a lot on his Slim Shady LP album, but he didn't even release any rap songs featuring any of the rappers from that rap group on his Slim Shady LP album or his Marshall Mathers LP album. And then for some reason, right after his Slim Shady LP album, he like completely and totally forgot about them and stopped shouting them out and mentioning them since his Slim Shady LP album, which is really sad. But originally on his Marshall Mathers LP album, he was going to have a song featuring at least two of the rappers from that group, being Young Z and Pace One, that were both supposed to be on his song Amityville, for those of you who don't know. But Dr. Dre made Eminem cut and delete their verses from that song because Eminem already had a shit ton of rap features on that album of his, which is fair to say the least. But, you know, at the same time, it's just so fucked up on every level that Dr. Dre made Eminem remove Young Z and Pace One's verses from that song of his when they were probably really excited and looking forward to being on one of Eminem's biggest, most famous, popular rap albums that he ever released, even more famous and popular than even his Slim Shady LP album was. I'm sure they were really happy and excited and looking forward to being on that album of his. But then I'm sure they were crushed when they found out that their verses had to be deleted or removed because Dr. Dre said so, because Eminem already had too many rap features on that album of his. But I feel as if Eminem would have instead just kept Under the Influence featuring D12 off of that album of his, that he could have maybe, just maybe, have possibly kept Young Z and Pace One's verses on his just incredible, outstanding, fantastic song Amityville, which would have also had, of course, and obviously Eminem and Bizarre as well, which would have been so fucking dope and badass, even more than the one we got, because the song would have been longer, which would have been so fucking cool, and I would have loved it, because that's one of my all-time favorite Eminem songs from that album of his. And I would have loved hearing verses from both Young Z and Pace One on that song. It would have been a dream come true, for me at least. And I'm sure other fans and stans of Eminem as well. And that is why I wish he would have kept the song Under the Influence off of that album of his, because that song is by far the weakest song on that rap album of his. But also, just 1 year later, Eminem was going to help D12 release their first debut album in the year 2001 anyway, being Devil's Night. And every single song on that album of theirs is perfection. Just complete and total perfection. There is not one song off of D12's debut album, Devil's Night, in 2001 that I hated, or that I wanted to skip, or that I didn't like, or didn't enjoy. But when it comes to Under the Influence, that song sucked ass. It sucked balls. It was garbage. It was terrible, horrible, awful. It was dumpster fire. I don't know what Eminem was thinking when he chose the sample he did for that song, and just the fact that he wasn't even really trying on that song. But I do think that song should have been replaced with another song. Like, Our House featuring Fred Durst, for example. That was a unreleased Marshall Mathers LP era Eminem song. And it would have been such an excellent add-on to his Marshall Mathers LP album if Eminem would have been smart and wise enough to have included that song on that album of his. And it was a missed opportunity that Eminem didn't include that song on that album of his. But also, that would have still only been 14 songs, and that would not have been enough, because he would have still needed 3 more to have a total of 17 songs. And the 3 more songs that I really wish more than anything that Eminem would have had on his Marshall Mathers LP album when he released it, which should have been February 13 in the year 2000 exactly, and no later than that. But other than the fact that he definitely should have kept and included the unreleased cut verses from both Young Z and Pace One on the original version of his song Amityville off of his Marshall Mathers LP album, and the fact that he should have replaced Under the Influence featuring D12 with Our House featuring Fred Durst, which would have been such a perfect, excellent, amazing, awesome, deep storytelling type of rap song that would have been such a great add-on and inclusion to his Marshall Mathers LP album if he would have included that song to that album of his, which he definitely should have done. But also, the three other songs that he should have put on his Marshall Mathers LP album should have been Jimmy, Brian, and Mike, which Eminem did eventually release on the 20th year anniversary expanded edition of his Eminem Show album, which honestly is fucking weird and just flat out stupid and dumb. And the reason I say that is because here's the thing. That song of his that he eventually did put and release on the expanded edition of his Eminem Show album does not fit the style or vibe or tone of that album of his, because that song originally was supposed to be released on his Marshall Mathers LP album. And what's also sad and unfortunate is the fact that Eminem not only did not release that song on his Marshall Mathers LP album, but he also didn't finish it either. Because when he eventually did release it on the expanded edition of his Eminem Show album for the 20th year anniversary of that album of his, he added some new verses that he recorded when he was, 49, almost 50. And it's just sad and unfortunate that Eminem didn't release that song on his Marshall Mathers LP album back in the year 2000, because that song originally was supposed to be on the album of his. And obviously, that song, because it was originally intended for that album of his, would have sounded the best and most perfect being included on that album of his when it was originally released in the year 2000. And what's also sad about the song Jimmy, Brian, and Mike is the fact that even Eminem's best friend Big Proof, who was sadly murdered in 2006 in Detroit, rest in peace Proof, whose real name was Jashawn Holton, Big Proof even wanted Eminem to include Jimmy, Brian, and Mike on his Marshall Mathers LP album. He even wanted Eminem to do that. And he was upset and sad and probably even kind of frustrated that Eminem, his best friend, did not include that song on his Marshall Mathers LP album, even though that song originally was supposed to be and intended to be on that album of his. And if Eminem would have cared enough and would have listened to his best friend Big Proof at the time, he would have done exactly that. He would have finished that song when he was actually young and youthful and in his 20s and both on drugs and an alcoholic. And he would have finished that finished that song entirely, all the way, completely, and he would have put that damn song, Jimmy, Brian, and Mike, on his Marshall Mathers LP album. But also, he should have put the song Let Us Live, which is another unreleased Marshall Mathers LP song. And I am really interested into knowing or finding out just how that song would have sounded. And again, that song was called Let Us Live, which was another unreleased Marshall Mathers LP era Eminem song that sadly and unfortunately Eminem did not put a release on that album of his that he definitely should have, which was a missed opportunity, because if he would have, then he would have had 16 songs. But that's still one song short of how many songs that Eminem should have had on his Marshall Mathers LP album. So the last song in which I really wish more than anything that Eminem would have released on his Marshall Mathers LP album, that I also wish he would have released on February 13 in the year 2000, and no later than that. The last song I wish he would have put on that album of his I wish would have been The Kids, which Eminem did release on the limited edition of his Marshall Mathers LP album. So it's kind of sort of like a deluxe edition of that album of his, but not really. And The Kids is definitely a song that should have been on the standard edition, like the original release of that album of his, and then he would have had 17 songs. So to recap, Eminem should have released his Marshall Mathers LP album on exactly February 13 in the year 2000, no later than that. He should have scrapped and cut the song Under the Influence featuring D12 and put instead Our House featuring Fred Durst. He should have been able to have kept the original unreleased verses from both Youngzy and Pace One on the original version of the song Amityville, so that way it would have been longer and therefore better. And then he should have also added and included the unreleased Marshall Mathers LP songs Jimmy, Brian, and Mike, that he should have finished and completed all the way. Let Us Live, which was another unreleased Marshall Mathers LP era Eminem song. And last but not least, The Kids. And just to add one more extra thing before I stop this video that Eminem definitely should have done with his Marshall Mathers LP album, he should have put 4 music videos on that album of his. But sadly and unfortunately, he only had 3, which is really weird, odd, and strange considering the fact that on his Slim Shady LP album, just the album that came out, right before that album of his, he had 4 music videos, 4 singles. 4 singles for 4 music videos on that album of his. But then when he released his Marshall Mathers LP album, he only had 3 singles and therefore only 3 music videos, which is and was sad. And it's also strange because when he released his Eminem Show album, he had like 5 whole fucking music videos on that album of his. So he definitely should have had 4 music videos on his Marshall Mathers LP album, since his Slim Shady LP album had 4 music videos. And I think that was a missed opportunity. And those are all the missed opportunities that came to when Eminem released his Marshall Mathers LP album. Because if he would have released that version of that album of his, it would have been perfect. It would have been so great. There would not have been anything bad about it whatsoever. There would not have been any problems or issues or flaws with it at all. None whatsoever. That would have been the best and greatest version of that album of his that he could have and should have released on, at the latest, February 13 in the year 2000 and not May 23 of 2000. And I'm so fucking pissed that not only did Eminem not get to release his Marshall Mathers LP album on February 13 in the year 2000, but also that he didn't put and release 17 songs on that album of his and also have 4 music videos on that album of his. But that's all I wanted to say in today's video. Let me know what you all think in the comment section down below. I'm out.